The rain was coming down in sharp, cold needles, but it wasn't the weather that made me shiver. It was the look on the security guard's face. He stood like a stone wall in front of the gold-trimmed revolving doors of the Sterling Hotel, his gloved hand resting firmly on his belt. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "I have strict instructions. Guests for the Vance Sterling engagement party are to use the main lobby. Staff and unauthorized individuals are to use the service entrance around the corner." I looked past him into the warm, amber glow of the lobby. There, standing just 5 meters away, was my sister Natalie. She was draped in silk, her engagement ring catching the light like a miniature sun. Next to her stood our mother, looking every bit the proud matriarch. They saw me, they saw the rain soaking through my coat. And then my mother did something that broke the last lingering piece of my heart. She smiled. It wasn't a smile of greeting. It was a smile of pure, calculated satisfaction. My name is Pamela Seard, and to my family I have always been the invisible daughter. For 34 years I was the one who was forgotten on birthdays, the one whose achievements were treated as cute hobbies, and the one who was expected to stay in the shadows so Natalie could shine. Today was Natalie's big day, an $85,000 engagement party she'd been bragging about on Facebook for months. I wasn't invited via a phone call or a card. I found out through a public post, just like a stranger would. When my mother finally called 3 days ago, it wasn't to ask me to be a bridesmaid. It was to tell me that if I insisted on showing up, I should make sure not to clutter up the professional photos with my office casual wardrobe. "The service entrance, Pamela," the guard repeated, stepping closer. "Don't make me ask again." I looked at my mother one last time. She adjusted her pearl necklace and turned her back on me, laughing at something Natalie whispered in her ear. They thought they had finally put me in my place. They thought they had successfully relegated me to the back of the house, literally and figuratively. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the Sterling Hotel didn't just happen to be the venue for this party. It was the crowning achievement of my career. 6 months ago, while my family was busy gossiping about Natalie's latest shopping spree, I was sitting in a glass-walled boardroom signing the deed to this very building. I am not a guest at the Sterling. I am the owner. I pulled my wet hair back from my face and reached into my bag, but I didn't pull out an invitation. I pulled out my phone. Just as I was about to dial a number, the heavy glass doors swung open. Marcus, the general manager of the hotel, came sprinting out into the rain, his face pale with panic. "Miss Seard?" he cried out, ignoring the security guard, who froze in confusion. "My sincerest apologies. The sensors alerted me you were at the door, but I couldn't believe you were being held out here in this weather." The security guard's jaw dropped. Inside the lobby, my mother and Natalie froze. They turned back toward the doors, their expressions of triumph melting into masks of utter bewilderment. Marcus didn't just open the door for me. He bowed. As he escorted me past the stunned security guard and directly toward my speechless family, he asked the one question that would turn their $85,000 celebration into a nightmare. "Ma'am," he said, loud enough for the entire lobby to hear, "shall I proceed with the immediate cancellation of the event as per your previous standing order regarding unauthorized guests?" The silence in the lobby was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. My mother's hand was frozen on her pearls, and Natalie looked like she'd just swallowed a fly. I walked past them, the water from my coat dripping onto the Italian marble floor that I paid to have polished every single week. No, Marcus, I said calmly, wiping a drop of rain from my cheek. Don't cancel it yet. I want to see exactly what $85,000 of my family's hard-earned money looks like when it's spent on my property. Of course, Miss Sird, Marcus replied, his eyes darting nervously toward my mother. The grand ballroom is prepared. The catering staff is on standby. However, there is the matter of the outstanding deposit. I turned to face my mother. Her face had gone from pale to a ghostly shade of green. Pamela, she whispered, her voice trembling. What is this? What did he just call you? He called me by my name, Mom, I said, something you haven't done without a sneer in over a decade. But we can talk about my real estate portfolio later. Right now, I believe you were busy enjoying the view from the front door. Natalie stepped forward, her voice high and shrill. You bought this hotel? That's impossible. You work in data or something. You can't afford a place like this. This was the core of the problem. To them, I was a boring data girl. They never cared enough to realize that the data I handled was for a global hedge fund I helped found. While they were spending their inheritance on designer bags and vacations to prove they were important, I was building an empire in the silence they forced me into. I didn't buy the hotel to spite you, Natalie, I said, though that was only half true. I bought it because it was a sound investment. The fact that you chose it for your party is just a delicious coincidence. Or perhaps it was fate. Fate has a funny way of making sure the person you look down on eventually ends up standing above you. My mother finally found her voice, though it was weak. Pamela, sweetheart, if you own the place, then surely we can settle the bill later? Family discount, right? I almost laughed. Family discount? You directed a security guard to send me to the service entrance, Mom. You stood there and smiled while I was treated like a stray dog in the rain. Where was the family discount on your respect? Marcus cleared his throat. Miss Seard, regarding the deposit. The credit card provided by Mrs. Seard was declined this morning for the final balance. We were going to discuss it with her upon arrival. But given the current situation, the $85,000 party wasn't even paid for. My mother had been posturing, trying to throw a party she couldn't afford to keep up appearances for Natalie's new in-laws, the Vances, a family that valued status above all else. The Vances will be here in 20 minutes, Natalie shrieked, clutching her silk skirts. If the doors aren't open, I'm ruined. Pamela, you have to do something. Tell him to open the ballroom. I looked at my sister, the golden child, the one who had spent her life taking and never giving. Then I looked at the manager. Marcus, I said, my voice cold as the rain outside. What is the policy for events with a declined balance? Immediate forfeiture of the space, ma'am, Marcus replied. Unless a new guarantor is found. Natalie started to cry, her expensive mascara running down her face. My mother gripped my arm, her eyes pleading for the first time in my life. But as I looked at the service entrance sign down the hall, I realized I had a choice to make. I could be the bigger person and pay the bill, or I could give them exactly what they had given me for 34 years, absolutely nothing. The lobby began to fill with the sounds of arriving guests. I could see the black town cars pulling up through the rain-streaked windows. The Vance family, wealthy, judgmental, and obsessed with punctuality, were stepping out. Pamela, please, my mother hissed, her voice a desperate whisper. Think of the family name. If the Vances see us being turned away from our own party, we'll never show our faces in this town again. The family name? I asked, tilting my head. You mean the name you left off the invitations? The name you didn't think was good enough to walk through the front door tonight? I I was stressed. She lied, her eyes darting toward the approaching guests. I didn't mean it.
You know how Natalie gets. She wanted everything to be perfect.
And perfect meant excluding me. I finished for her. At that moment, the Vances entered the lobby. Mr. Vance, a man who looked like he was carved out of granite, walked straight toward us, followed by his son, Natalie's fiancé. Is there a problem? Mr. Vance asked, his eyes sweeping over my wet coat and then landing on the stressed face of the hotel manager. The ballroom doors are still locked. Natalie opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She looked at me, her eyes wide with terror. She was waiting for me to expose her. She was waiting for me to tell the man she was trying to impress that her family was broke and that her loser sister was actually her landlord. I looked at the Vances, then I looked at Marcus. There is no problem, Mr. Vance, I said, my voice smooth and professional. There was simply a slight delay in the final walkthrough. I am Pamela Seard, the owner of the Sterling. I was just giving my mother and sister a personal tour of the facilities. The relief that washed over my mother's face was almost pathetic. She let out a breath she'd been holding for 10 minutes. Natalie actually managed a shaky smile. They thought they'd won. They thought that, once again, good old, flexible Pamela had folded under the pressure of family duty. The owner? Mr. Vance looked impressed, finally offering a nod of respect. I had heard a young woman had acquired the property. Impressive. Well, shall we? After you, I said. As the Vances and my family marched toward the grand ballroom, my mother leaned in and whispered, "Thank you, Pamela.
I knew you wouldn't let us down.
We'll talk about the bill tomorrow." "Oh, we'll talk about it right now," I said, grabbing her elbow and pulling her back while the others continued on.
I signaled to Marcus.
He handed me a tablet with a digital contract pulled up. "I'm not paying for this party, Mom," I said, my voice a low, lethal hum. "And neither is the hotel. You have exactly 5 minutes to sign this personal promissory note, backed by your home's equity, to cover the $85,000. If you don't sign it, Marcus will step into that ballroom and announce to the Vances that the party is over due to a lack of funds." "You wouldn't," she breathed. "I've spent 34 years being invisible," I said. "Tonight, I'm the only person in this room who matters. Sign the paper or start explaining to the Vances why your perfect life is built on a foundation of bounced checks."
My mother's hand shook so hard she could barely hold the stylus.
She looked at the ballroom where the music was just starting to play, and then back at me. She signed. But as I watched her walk away, I realized that the $85,000 wasn't the real debt she owed me. And before the night was over, I was going to collect the interest. The party was a success by everyone else's standards. The champagne flowed, the orchestra played, and Natalie twirled in her expensive silk dress, playing the role of the blushing bride-to-be. But every time she caught my eye from across the room, her smile faltered. She knew. I didn't stay for the toasts. I didn't need to hear my mother give a speech about family values while she was effectively my debtor.
I sat in my private office on the top floor of the hotel, looking down at the city lights.
An hour later, there was a knock on my door. It was my mother. She looked 10 years older than she had that morning. "Are you happy now?" she asked, closing the door behind her.
"You've humiliated me. You've put a lien on my house.
You've made it so I can't even look at my own daughter without feeling like a tenant." "I didn't do any of that, Mom," I said, not looking up from my desk. "You did. You spent money you didn't have to impress people who don't care about you. You chose to treat your eldest daughter like a servant. I simply stopped subsidizing your delusions. We're family, Pamela, she cried. Family is supposed to support each other. Support is a two-way street, I replied, finally looking at her. For 30 years I supported your ego. I supported Natalie's whims. I stayed quiet so you wouldn't have to feel bad about how much more successful I was than your favorite child. That ends tonight. I stood up and walked to the window. Tomorrow morning my lawyers will be sending over the formal repayment schedule. I'm not going to take your house, Mom. I'm not that cruel. But you are going to pay back every cent of that $85,000 with interest, and you're going to do it while knowing that every luxury you enjoy from now on is because I allowed it. She looked like she wanted to scream, to hit me, to tell me I was ungrateful. But she couldn't. She had no cards left to play. She turned and walked out of the office, her shoulders slumped. I realized then that setting boundaries isn't about revenge. It isn't about making people feel small so you can feel big. It's about personal atmospheric pressure. If you don't set your own pressure, the world will crush you. I stayed in my office until the last guest had left. I watched from the balcony as Natalie and her fiancé drove away in a shower of rose petals. I watched my mother get into a taxi alone. I am no longer the invisible daughter. I am the woman who owns the room, the building, and the narrative. If you are watching this and you feel like the person who is always overlooked, the one who is expected to give until there is nothing left, I want you to understand something. Your worth is not determined by people who refuse to see it. You don't have to buy a hotel to prove your point. You just have to stop walking through the service entrance of your own life. You have the right to use the front door. You have the right to be the owner of your own destiny. It might be lonely at first. People who are used to using you will call you cold or changed. Let them. It's better to be cold and respected than warm and trampled. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. This story is for everyone who has ever been told they weren't enough. If you've ever had to stand up to family or set a boundary that felt impossible, tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to see more stories of strength and justice, hit that subscribe button. You are not invisible to me. Until next time, keep your head high and stay at the front of the house.